I just want to get a few thoughts on the record. They probably won't be seen by anybody of consequence. But while I'm driving on the interstate south in Iowa, I want to get some thoughts on camera. You might ask why a man from New Mexico and international background and such finds himself on the interstate alone in Iowa with all of his possessions in this vehicle. I tried to escape the bullshit by getting a medical opinion in Canada, but didn't happen. They turned me away at the border, even though I'm not a criminal. I have no criminal record. I have a valid passport, and in the 90s, I've been to Canada a few times too, with no problem. Matter of fact, I was a volunteer for Habitat for Humanity. I believe this was my junior year of college in Boston, I was dealing with serious chronic illnesses at the time that were really unnecessary and unfortunate. And I've been perceived as a bad person, as a lazy person, as an unmotivated person. That's not fair. I've been sick. Anyways, a group of us, our college chapter at Boston University, went to Baldwin, Michigan to spend spring break to build a home for a family that was less fortunate. The quickest way to get there was to go through Niagara and cut through Canada. Back then, in the 90s, before 9/11 and everything else, and all the paranoia and the COVID pandemic, the border was like, the Canadians were like, "Hey, how are you doing?" We're like, "We're great." "Well, where are you going?" "Well, we're going to Michigan to do volunteer work." "Oh, well, great. Have a great day." And it was a van packed full of college students, right? We didn't need a passport, and they didn't even check our license, our IDs. Maybe they checked the drivers, but it was a group of us, and it was just like, enjoy Canada, enjoy your way through here, God bless. And now I get turned away with a valid passport, and nothing. I'm like, wow, that's pretty wild. I wanted to share that story, and I also want to share that the customs and immigration people in Canada were very polite, and the Canadians they're guilty of being too polite, right? I loved it. I felt this genuine connection that they're like, we can't help you because and this isn't the way you go about it, and so we're going to turn you away. And I was in tears there, and because I'm like, what's left for me? There's nothing left for me. The game of life has been rigged, and I'm screwed. And so I asked my dad, how do I get out of this? And he said, well, you better come down to Tucson where he lives and see the doctors there. Yeah, like I trust the medical community and I trust my father. No. So I'm driving down that direction, and I got a full tank of gas and stuff, and that's why I'm in Iowa, folks. This is why I'm in Iowa. So I'm headed down that general direction, but I'm not, and I wanted to also point out that I am not a violent person. I'm not an aggressive person. I am not, I'm not delusional. I'm sound. I'm rational. I'm calm. A lot of times I'm hyper emotional and in a complete panic mode where I'm in fight or flight response, where your body's saying, dude, you're in danger. Freak out. fight or get the fuck out of there, or, you know, and so that's what I've been doing. And so, anybody who, when their body is saying, dude, your life's in danger, well, you're going to come off as irrational because your body's doing everything to stay alive. And, yeah, it's pretty wild, man. And so here I am, driving down, you know, I had horrible symptoms last night, and I'm starting to get symptoms now. I didn't wake up until about 9 a.m. Because, boy, I needed that sleep, man, in a clean bed, and, you know, I was really symptomatic, but I kept my cool, got a room, took a shower, washed off all the pathogens, and then climbed into bed and got some sleep. No, it's, I gotta admit, man, I'm not looking for pity, but I am looking for the system to change, and I'm looking for the right responsible parties to carry the burden of their atrocities, their egregious acts, starting with my father and going to Hugh Miller. His wife Catherine's probably complicit in it too. I'm very curious that she's a Facebook friend of mine when she doesn't respect me. There are a lot of wolves in sheep's clothing out there that, you know, say, hey man, I got your back, you can trust me. But no. When push comes to shove, you know, the only person you can truly trust is yourself. I mean, when your own family's betrayed you. But the thing is that at this point, man, I'm not fighting for my life. I'm fighting for yours, your future, your kids' future. And until these injustices stop, until people stop growing pathogens in labs and intentionally making people sick and chronically sick, I mean, that's beyond illegal. It's beyond unethical. It violates every national law, and it violates every international law. And so I have been parasitized across state lines and internationally. I was parasitized in China too. It's something else, man, something else. Back in 2005, I was in China. I taught English in Changsha, which is, sorry, I can't pronounce it well in Mandarin for you to understand, but it's the capital of the Hunan province. It's a province that is notorious for foodborne parasites, and I was diagnosed at age 18, although I already had the infection for at least a couple of years, with ocular toxoplasmosis in my left eye, where I almost lost my vision. Toxoplasmosis is a nasty protozoa parasite that is often attacks the central nervous system, including the brain and the eye. And well, I guess the eye is not technically part of the central nervous system, but it's right there. After that, I graduated university with a degree in psychology and statistics. I graduated with like a 4.2, summa cum laude. My first semester was tragic. I took 3 100-level courses, and I got C's, and I was lucky to get C's, honestly. And I couldn't concentrate. I couldn't think. Then my psychiatrist put me on atomoxetine, or Strattera, which is an ADHD medication, and things started to click, and I could think again. You know, I was dealing with a lot of anxiety and depression and fatigue issues, but I pushed through, and I excelled, despite everything working against me. And then, boy, man, and then, you know, I didn't even attend my own high school graduation, my college graduation, because, well, first of all, my high school graduation was so amazing. But I told myself, man, it's like, I've been framed to think like, dude, well, that's not enough, man. Like, graduating summa cum laude at the top of your class, and you know, where everybody's like, wow, man, just in awe of everything that you produce. And your assignments, you go above and beyond what the instructor assigns. Well, that's something else. I don't know. Anyways, I worked in a couple of research labs in the psych department. One was at the, it was then called the Mind Institute on North Campus at the University of New Mexico, with Mike Weisend, who's a cognitive neuroscience researcher, an MEG, MRI, EEG, and I did my own little project there that, you know, opened a lot of doors for graduate school. And then I worked in Steve Verney's lab, who was a clinical psychologist and researcher, where we did various eye tracking, you know, correlated that with IQ, like pupil dilation. I don't know if there was much there, but I've never really followed the results of that research. But he was really interested in a racial component or an ethnic component, trying to show that correlate pupil processing with intelligence, pupil dilation and such. I think that's the gist of the research. Back then, I didn't know a whole lot on that sort of stuff. I was just a cog. I was just a research assistant, right? But from there, after I graduated, I was unable to get my applications in for doctoral programs, because that was my goal. It was like not until I achieve a PhD will I have done it. And every single semester after I started Terra, I kept on adding to my load, and I volunteered at a crisis line, the Agora Crisis Center. I trained other volunteers on effective methods of you know, reflective listening and active listening and you know, just and how to empathy, and so many people just need to be heard, because so many people's stories are just shut down. Like, dude, no, you're not allowed to feel that way, and even though, or you're not allowed to be sick. Like, oh no, you're dealing with depression or anxiety, and it's your fault, and your behaviors are maladaptive, and so your diet's maladaptive, no, actually you're sick. You're sick with likely sick with undiagnosed pathogens. If you're taking multiple medications and you're not getting much benefits and you're still struggling in life, there's an underlying pathogenic biological cause for that. And the biological cause for my chronic illnesses since I was a young child, and which progressively got worse in middle school, while I was living in Houston, Texas, inside the loop, where I couldn't even jog. I couldn't. I mean, I was 11, 12 years old, and I couldn't do cross country. I couldn't run hardly at all. I couldn't play basketball very well. And it wasn't, even though I was a very active child, young, you know, I'd play all day. Like, I was different. I was neurodivergent, likely on the spectrum, ADHD, brain fog, however you want to label it. All right, all these labels are bullshit. All right, they're all indicative of well, either you don't have a pathology and the system's trying to tell you that you're sick or have a mental illness when you don't. The system's broken, or you have an underlying etiology or cause that is pathogenic, likely parasitic. Mind blown there, huh? Good luck getting a parasite diagnosed in the United States or in any industrialized country. I don't know about Asia, but you know, it's probably the same as true all across Europe, Canada. You know, just got turned away from Canada. They're like, it's no better here, man. No better here. I mean, just look at Vancouver and their fentanyl crisis. I have a friend in London, Ontario, who was suffering like me, you know, it was And doctors are always like, I don't know what's going on. And you would try treatment after treatment, hoping that the next thing's going to be, you know, lightning in a bottle and you know, fix everything. And no, man. And so then you lose all hope, all right? When you're chronically ill and you're told that you're just a lazy, unmotivated person and your life circumstances are your fault. Boy, that's hard not to internalize. And doctors are just like, you know, if you have a mental health condition or gosh, if you've had to turn to self-medicate through alcohol or illicit drugs or anything like that, and boy, they're going to treat you like a piece of crap. In the United States, if you're on Medicaid as a working adult, they're going to treat you like crap. All right, they're going to do nothing to resolve your chronic conditions. And matter of fact, many of these medications are going to result in like elevated cholesterol or elevated levels of glucose and cause type 2 diabetes unnecessarily. And with me, it's giving me tardive dyskinesia, where I have to do these involuntary movements with my tongue, and I do body rocking now, right? I do body rocking. Ain't that fucked up? So now before it was like I looked healthy, but now I just look mental, right? With this body rocking, and I mean, if you look at my face, it's all emaciated. I've dropped 40 pounds in the past few months, and it's not been from diet or exercise. It's likely due to tapeworms. Back in July, I had a liver fluke, undeniable, that came from my rectum. I wiped it off without having a bowel movement. Just tons of mucus and blood all over it. And then there's this strange gelatinous tissue, is what they called it, where the doctor said, oh, I think that was a mushroom. I think you ate a mushroom. No, dude. And so he sent it for lab analysis. I went to the ER. It was the middle of the night. I went to the ER and said, could you please analyze this? Unfortunately, I didn't put it in alcohol, so I just brought it dry and it dried out. But I did take pictures of it. I took videos of it. It's undeniably a liver fluke, guys, which is it's a type of flatworm, and type of parasitic flatworm. And boy, that's something else, huh? But all my stool exams, everybody, the doctors, all my diagnostics always come out negative. You don't have parasites. You don't have parasites, Mike. And then all the skin damage. They just gaslight you to your face. Like, no, that's just Greg's skin. That's just Greg. That's just Greg's skin. There's nothing abnormal there. That's just you, Greg. You know? No, it's not. Okay? It's not just Greg's skin. It's just Greg's skin with parasites on it. You know? You know, parasites are amazing organisms, and they are very, very elusive. They are elusive to our immune systems. They are elusive to a lot of blood work, and they are visually elusive. The ones that are ectoparasites or capable of living outside. Various ones like hookworms or strongyloides larvae. There's a free-living form of the larvae, and it's something else, man. I need to tell my insights, but you know, irritable bowel syndrome, Crohn's disease, autoimmune disorders, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, mast cell activation syndrome, POTS, brain fog. These are all parasitic-based, guys. All parasitic-based. Remarkably, all of my chronic health conditions cleared up within a few weeks, or became manageable within a few weeks, after starting a single supplement called Luteolin. That is, it has neuroprotective qualities. It's an antioxidant. It crosses the blood-brain barrier. It's a natural occurring thing that occurs in vegetables and peanut shells. So, you know, you can't really patent it. But you can't really get enough in your diet, supposedly. I don't know. A lot of research is erroneous. I don't know if that's true or not. it has amazing neuro and anti-inflammatory qualities, antioxidant qualities, neuroprotective qualities, and so if you're dealing with chronic inflammation that's denied by the medical system, that's the cause of various illnesses is chronic inflammation. Well, what's causing the inflammation, folks? You know, could there be an active infection that's denied? Well, I think so. I know so. In my case, that's true. And I know in tons of other cases, it's true. My story is not unique, and my story is not about me. And so, I just, remind me tell you why I smoke or vape. It's good. And anyways, I'll create another video for that, but to stay on course. Not only are parasites a significant problem within the borders of the United States and other industrialized nations that are denied by the medical community and such, and our institutions and our government. There's huge profit and control over that, and the pharmaceuticals and our food, and man, I recommend you guys avoid refined sugars like high fructose corn syrup and such, and watch your diet and what you eat, because the reason, okay, parasites manipulate your diet and your behaviors, and you know, they do. They do throughout the animal kingdom, and we're part of the animal kingdom, and they do it with us. Okay, if you got a sweet tooth, you likely got parasites. Okay, because they like sugar. All right, they like sugar. And don't you find it remarkable that even sugar is even in our bread in the United States? I mean, the ingredients within our foods in the United States, I mean, you can't, they're illegal. This is illegal in the EU. All right, yeah. And then what's really remarkable is that, okay, there are next to no government subsidies for fruits and vegetables, except for like corn and wheat or whatever that can be turned into refined carbohydrates, right? And so like high fructose corn syrup, white bread, you know, even wheat bread. Eat whole grains, guys. Eat whole grains. Eat nuts. Eat vegetables. Eat organic. And I've never been a health nut. I can tell you that. Anybody can tell you. I've had a worst diet ever, man. Pizza and chocolate and ice cream and sugar cereal and you know, tons of coffee and yeah. I haven't been calling the shots there, okay? The parasites have. Like, they're telling me, dude, we're hungry. Feed us with sugars, you know? Wow, mind blown, man, mind blown. Yeah, and also, you know, don't you find it interesting that those with history of mental illnesses and such or addiction, that most of them smoke, and it's those who are in shitty life situations who are smokers, and why is that? And then those who are in the shittiest of the situations often smoke menthol cigarettes. All right, I don't want to make this a race thing, but maybe it is, guys. Okay, why is there a stereotype that black people smoke menthol cigarettes, Newports and Cools and stuff, right? Or you know, even like white trash, trailer trash. Excuse me. I'm not saying that derogatorily. I'm saying that because there's a reason why. Okay. Nicotine is an anti-helminthic. It's an anti-parasitic. Okay? So your body is saying, boy, that was good. Because it's helping fight infections that are denied, likely. And then why menthol in particular? Well, imagine taking peppermint extract, right? And putting it on your skin and on your butt and or on your groin, right? That's going to sting, right? Well, imagine what that does to a worm, right? Imagine what that would do to an earthworm, right? Well, other worms aren't any different, be it parasites, helminths, or be it flatworms or roundworms, or it doesn't matter, right? So the menthol is like, imagine if you had like peppermint oil all over you, like, and especially in the sensitive areas, then it would really disrupt your life. As long as it's there and active, right? It would prevent you from procreating. It would prevent you from, doing lots of things, doing what you need to do, right, to survive. Well, so the same is true with worms, even more so, okay? So, the nicotine is an anti-helminthic, an anti-parasitic, mild, but it's effective. I mean, it's effective for some parasites. And then the menthol, well, they don't like that either on their bodies, on their skins. So menthol cigarettes are actually protective. And so that's why so many people with mental health conditions smoke, because it's protecting them in a way. I mean, it has horrible consequences, smoking, right? And health consequences. But man, does it have some benefits? Just like, other people who turn to other drugs. Well, first of all, a lot of people turn to alcohol because they have so much trauma and anxiety. Like, alcohol and benzodiazepines are amazing at relieving anxiety, social anxiety, things like that, right? So, there's a high positive relationship, correlation, between social anxiety or any anxiety disorder and alcohol abuse, substance use disorders, or alcoholism, however you want to frame it. All right, whatever words you want to use. Well, that's for a reason, because a lot of anxiety is actually because, well, you're sick. A lot of depression is because you're sick. And it's not because you're mentally weak. It's because you have parasites that are denied. Same with schizophrenia, likely due to Toxoplasmosis infection, Toxoplasma gondii, and bipolar disorder, same, panic disorder, all right? Hoarding. All these are a result from, all these things are skyrocketing in prevalence rates, all result from parasites. Parkinson's, I don't know, the list goes on and on and on. Just look at all the chronic disease that is skyrocketing since the 60s, right? Since the war on drugs, since the Nixon administration. After we've allegedly controlled for all these parasites, when we can't even control for common, like more harmless parasites like lice, or bed bugs, or the dreaded scabies. And life is really hard when you have parasites, okay? When you have undiagnosed parasitic infections, your life is going to be really hard, okay? Everything is a challenge. Everything, okay? Parasites, they don't want to necessarily kill you immediately, although they can. They want to prolong your life, but they want to make it miserable, right? So they want to make sure that everything internally is, or even on your skin is optimal for their ability to survive and reproduce. So there's a reason if you smoke menthol cigarettes, and it's not a racial thing, it's a medical thing, okay? Likely, not always. I mean, like, I can't make generalizations, and I'm not. that tells me that man, how many African Americans, how many minority groups, how many people in just awful life positions have been treating themselves, and a lot of African American products, like hair products and stuff, it's got like sulfur in it and stuff. Anti-parasitic people. Like, is your mind blown yet? Is your mind blown yet? No, there's a reason. There's a reason for certain maladaptive behaviors. There's a reason for certain drug use. Even though we all know smoking is horrible, like it's might be saving your life. Ain't that a son of a bitch? But what doctor is going to tell you that? None. What else was I going to say? Oh, well, other drugs. Okay, so we covered alcohol and cigarettes. Well, how about illegal drugs? Boy, we treat our kids with Adderall, where meth ain't much different, folks. All right, it's pretty much the same drug, but it's able to cross the blood-brain barrier. If you're always exhausted because you have parasitic infections that are denied, wouldn't it make sense to self-medicate to give yourself some energy so that you can be more functional? Or how about if you've just given up in life and you have so much trauma and heartache and you know the game of life is rigged and you've just given up? Like, would you not turn to opiates to numb out? I don't know. Seems like a reasonable response to me. Seems rational. And it's not your fault for having a substance use problem. It's the system's fault. Okay? Nobody's providing you effective tools to deal with your trauma or to improve your health. That your chronic conditions that are the true cause of them are denied. That's messed up, man. That's messed up. And this is 32 minutes, so I'm going to end it there. And when I think of more stuff, I will say it. But again, this probably isn't going to reach anybody. I don't expect to either be alive or not hospitalized involuntarily pretty soon. But hey, man, it's the least I can do is speak up about the bullshit and point out that everybody's getting fucked. And then coke bugs, meth mites. All right, have you ever seen the Chappelle show where he's mocking like a crack addict, like a homeless black crack addict, and he's sitting there scratching himself? Dude, that's because he's got bugs on him, man. Really bugs. They're very visually elusive, but man, you can feel them. But when the medical community denies them, same with meth mites or coke crank bugs or whatever the hell you want to call them. All right, these are legitimate parasites. Okay, and likely being intentionally released on people. I know they were in my case because I've proven that. And so, yeah, man. Tactile hallucinations, the science behind it's bullshit. The science behind formication, which is the sensation of bugs or worms crawling under your skin, where it's alleged to be due to tactile hallucinations, due to disrupted dopamine system dysregulation. Like, bullshit. It's bullshit. All right, and so that makes me ask, how much of science is valid, and who controls the science? Who controls the publishers? Who funds the science? Ask yourself that question, okay? Because he who controls the media controls the population, right? Well, how about he who controls the science? That's even more powerful. He who controls the medicine, that's even more powerful. The game of life is rigged, all right? I want to believe in free will and hard work and determinism and all that, but man, no. Either, if you've crossed the wrong people, or you were just born into the wrong family. You're screwed. All right, you're screwed. But you don't have to be screwed, okay? Because you're not alone. All right. I might be alone right now, but I know that there are at least 1 million other Americans, and probably more, out there suffering like me. But they don't know why they're suffering, and they don't know how to solve their problems. I'm trying to give you the tools here. And so you need to do your research on antiparasitics. You need to do your research on a diet that will starve parasites. You need to do your own homework, okay? Don't trust my word at face value. Don't trust anybody's word at face value, okay? Think for yourselves, all right? I don't care if a thought comes into your mind. Even if it sounds ridiculous and taboo and it's counter to what popular belief says and what those in positions of authority say, what the government says, what doctors say, okay? Explore that on your own. Be like, hey man, is there anything to that? And just take notes. Like what happened just before that caused this or whatever, and see if there's a pattern there. If there's a pattern there, you're not crazy, all right? You're onto something. You're onto gold. You're onto pure gold, information gold. Knowledge is power. And there is so much misinformation out there. There is so much information at our fingertips. It's incredible. But we've been flooded with lies and misinformation too. And that's been intentional to overwhelm us and be like, man, I don't even know where to begin to find the right information. Well, you got to find people that you can really trust. But please be careful of the wolves in sheep's clothing. And in my case, my father is the wolf in sheep's clothing. All right? And he's manipulated the people of my life. And they've come, saying, hey man, we're friends, we're allies, you can trust us, and then betray you, psychologically abuse you, gaslight you. All right? Never trust a narcissist. If somebody gaslights you, if somebody disrespects you, get them out of your life. I don't care if they're blood. Okay? That if they invalidate you and just shut you down, get them out. Get them out. Okay? They're toxic. And this is a tall order, and you should be scared. You should be afraid. And you should approach what I'm saying with skepticism. All right? Because what I'm saying is highly taboo and highly counter. And people are going to say, boy, that guy's just delusional, man. Don't listen to him. No. Yeah. Again, by design. It's really beautiful. It's really, whoever set this up, man, it was a group of very, very influential people with a lot of resources and knowledge of psychological principles of manipulation and framing, and how to deny things, and wow, how to cover your footsteps and strip yourself of accountability and make those who are in submissive positions to be accountable, and have you ever felt like people expect you to be just unduly grateful for the breadcrumbs you get for your food stamps or your Medicaid or just a little financial assistance, but it comes with strings attached, and it comes with a medical system that actually denies your root cause of problems. It comes with psychological abuse. It comes with stigma. It comes with blaming you, and why aren't you getting better? We're helping you. Why aren't you getting better? Well, you can't get better if you got an infection that's not dealt with. If it's not identified and made legitimate, and boy, man, speak up, demand more from the medical community. And I think a lot of doctors are good people, and I think a lot of them are being bamboozled as well. And the COVID pandemic shows that to me. Okay. And pathogens, including parasites, don't care about our borders, folks. All right? They don't stop at the border of Mexico and Texas and across the Rio Grande, all right? The Rio Grande does not stop parasites, guys. The mosquitoes, the flies, the midges that go across, and other vectors, ticks and stuff. Dude, they don't care about our international borders, all right? And so the belief, the notion that we have control for parasitic infections a consequence, that's just insanity. Because they've been effective. They've been they've dominated this planet for 300 million years. That's like Homo sapiens, humans, we've been around this planet for 300,000 years. Long enough for parasites to adapt to take advantage of our biological weaknesses. And then when we are scapegoated, gaslighted, and told, hey man, don't pay attention to those sensations on your skin because, well, if you do, then you're just feeding into crazy. Huh? No, you're not, dude. You're protecting yourself. Okay? When you got an itch. When you feels like something's biting you or stinging you, take notice. And don't ever accept that, hey man, that's just all in your head. Hey, you might just have damaged nerve endings. No, you don't. You don't. Okay? That's your body saying, dude, danger. All right? Danger. Okay? And pay attention to your body. Trust your body, because you know your body better than anybody else. You know when you're sick. You know when things aren't right. Okay? Believe yourself. Don't believe me. Believe yourself. Listen to your body. Listen to your mind. And understand why your life is so difficult. And, because it doesn't need to be. It doesn't need to be. And you don't need to be ashamed of being sick. You don't need to be ashamed of being on the bottom. Because you're strong. You're resilient. You're fighting for a better life. God bless people. God bless. Stay strong. Stay resilient. But I'm likely tapping out because, I don't know, man. I don't know what the fate has for me, but man, keep up the fight. And please take this information and do something with it, okay? And don't fight for me. Fight for yourself. Fight for your family. Fight for your loved ones who are sick, who have chronic illnesses. The doctors say, boy, I don't know what's going on. Bullshit. 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 And we can all thank John D. Rockefeller for all of this, huh? Going back to 1909, our broken education system, our broken healthcare system, wanting an army of good workers, not critical thinkers, man. No. Critically think. Challenge the bullshit. If things don't make sense, speak up. Ask stupid questions, okay? Please ask stupid questions. Ask things that other people are too afraid to ask. Either too intimidated or too afraid to sound stupid. They're not stupid, okay? You're not stupid. But you've been deceived and you're not asking the right questions. We've all been trained to ignore important things like stuff crawling on us or, no, guys, no. Okay, we're fighting, we're directing all of our energy to the wrong stuff because without our health, we can never succeed. We can never have a quality life, all right? And we all just want a quality life, right? We all just want a quality life. My life is never going to be quality again, and my message, again, is not about me. And my story is not unique. I will add one more thing, because I need to end, because this is really long, 44 minutes, it'll take forever to upload. But my great aunt was a great woman, and she was stripped of her dignity with a horrible case of Alzheimer's. That was likely intentional, likely parasitic-based. Okay? My other aunt, the other woman who truly loved me unconditionally, my Aunt Kay, she died. I don't know how many years ago that was. It's been about a half dozen or so. Okay, she got fibromyalgia. Okay, parasitic-based, and likely intentional. Now, both of these women knew information that crossed my mother, and who's protecting my mother but my father, and who's done everything to champion my mother's love and to keep her in fold, my father, who had horrible depression when I was a child, and had no effective treatments, and acted out in rage, and was stripped of her youth, or early adulthood, because she got knocked up and had to get married with my oldest sister Angie, my mother. All right, and then who's likely? And then there's my sister Allison, and then there's me, who I'm likely, the sin baby of my mother who is acting out and unhappy and being like, fuck, how did I get married to this man? And then, had an affair or something. I don't know if it was a one-night stand or if she was in love with another man. But my father told me, I wasn't your mother's first choice. Wow. And then my mother, one time, I said, Mom, men are the way we're biologically wired, when we travel and stuff, it's fidelity is those men who travel aren't very, faithful typically, because, well, we have biological needs, right? We're driven to procreate. And that's a biologically driven, guys, okay? And she was, and I didn't say that with any intent, and I wasn't thinking about my father at all. And she was like, no fooling. So, hey, my dad's fucked around too, so he's no saint. I've caught my dad watching porn. He's no saint, but he judges me. He judges me for going to a strip club, all right? And I'm no saint, all right? But most of my actions have actually been for reasons, okay? We need connection. We need community. We need touch. We need, as men, we need sex. We need intimacy. We need belonging. We need purpose. I've been stripped of all that. So what's a person going to do? How are they going to react when they've been stripped of these basic necessities? On the Maslow hierarchy of needs, what are you going to do? You're going to get those needs met one way or another, even if you have to pay for it, even if it's fake, right? And when you're chronically ill and you're chronically fatigued and you're dealing with brain fog, and the only effective solution that you have at the time is to self-medicate with stimulants, well, you're going to do that too. It makes sense. It's all logical, guys. It's all logical. All right. I've never loved the drug culture. I've never loved. I don't like drugs, honestly. And I'm clean, and I have been clean for months. And I was clean for months, and then the game of life was rigged, and I was set up to use again, and that's fucked up. Because why? Because I have dealt with my chronic illnesses, my underlying chronic conditions, from this infection right here, through luteolin, with its anti-inflammatory qualities and antioxidant qualities and neuroprotective qualities. Yeah, it's remarkable. And so I was easily. It was easy for me to walk away from all that. The nicotine, that's another story. And coffee is another story as well. But, illicit drugs, no desire for them. None. Zero. None. 100%. And so I'm going to be discredited. I'm going to be shown as a bad person. I'm going to be shown as a person who has paid for companionship. Dude, I'm just trying to get my basic needs met one way or another, when the game of life has been rigged, and you, as a man, when you're chronically ill and you are not in a high status position, you are not desirable. When you look sick and you act sick, you are not desirable, all right? Women are hardwired not to be attracted to men who are sick or can't provide, and I haven't been able to provide. And remarkably, when I've been healthy, I've actually been a very desirable mate. But man, when I'm sick, no woman wants to touch me with, like, nobody wants to be in the same stadium with me, let alone the same pool. Wink, wink. Anyways, that's my story. I'm not justifying my actions, and I'm not telling you to follow my life path. I'm just giving you knowledge of why certain people have done certain things. And I'm giving you the power to find the cause of your problems and to resolve them. Because, drugs are bad, all right? But a lot of pharmaceuticals are bad too, all right? I've proven that. Look at my mouth movements. Not good stuff, guys. Not good stuff. So making you numb inside sensory-wise or giving yourself diabetes, and which is reversible, it's by design, guys. It's by design. Good luck, people. Good luck. Do what you want with this information.